Hello and welcome to the TerraTech webinar with Peter Bell today, and he's going to be talking about how to do almost anything, undo it all with Git. And just in case you haven't met Peter before, he speaks at a lot of conferences and he's also an amazing book author. So very excited to have him here. He's also does things with GitHub and does a lot of training on Git. So hopefully if you have any questions on getting your source control working perfectly with Git, he'll be able to help you out. And we're going to take questions throughout the session, and also we'll have a Q&A at the end. So thanks very much, and take it away, Peter.
Michael, thanks very much. So great, thanks everyone for coming out. What I wanted to focus on today was a fairly specific slice of Git, which is how to undo almost anything with Git. Because I remember in the early days of Git, I would do something and I'd always be terrified, like, is this going to work and how am I going to mess things up? And over time, I've learned some other, a range of different techniques that can be used for refining and undoing things with Git. Michael, just to say, I think your breathing's coming through, so I don't know if you want to just mute.
That sounds a good idea. I really don't want to breathe heavily over your presentation, Peter. So I'll just mute myself out until we do the first poll in a few minutes.
Sounds great. So what we're going to do here then is look at different ways of undoing things with Git. And this is going to be presentation style, so I'm going to show you what I'm doing, but feel free to follow along. So if you happen to have Git installed, and you can open up a terminal window, please do that, because then you can actually get some hands-on experience and you'll have a repository after this where you can see exactly what you did as well as what I did. So without further ado, let's have a look at undoing things in Git. And the starting point is to go create a repository. So if anyone wants to follow along, just type git -- version just to make sure that you actually have a version of Git. It doesn't need to be 1.8.4, but if it's 1.7.8 or later, that will be absolutely fine. If you get a chance to upgrade to a new version, you should sometime. There are some nice new features in the 1.8 releases, but nothing to rush through at the moment. And then the other thing I do usually before I create a repository, a project, a place to put the stuff in, is I'm just going to do a git status. And you might say, well, why would you do git status before you create a repository? And the answer is, I've seen a number of people who create one Git repository within another, and it gets messy quick. So you always want to make sure before you clone a repository, pulling it down from GitHub or Bitbucket or elsewhere, or when you are going to create a repository, just type a git status and make sure that it says, hey, you're not in a Git repository. That's good news. And that's exactly what I got here on the screen. So now I can just git init, and this is git init. And let's initialize, let's imagine we're building a website. So I'm going to git init website. And that's going to do two things. It's going to create a directory below me called website, and it's going to initialize that as a Git project by creating the .git directory. And for anyone who doesn't know, that is what makes a project a Git project. If you're to delete the .git directory, it's not a Git repository anymore. You lose all the history, you lose all the branches, everything. So that's, if you ever really get into trouble with a Git repository and you just want the files, you can just delete the .git directory and you're good. But now though, let's go into the website. So cd into the website, and let's check the Git status now. And it should be telling me I'm on branch master and I haven't yet made my initial commitment on having files. So I'm just going to use some simple Unix commands. I'm going to use, for example, touch, index.html and index.css. And I'm going to ask you to pretend that what I'm really doing is sitting and working and programming here, but of course what we're doing is just creating some files, and I might echo to put some content into them just so we can do that quickly and really spend most of the time focusing on the version control system, which is what we're trying to focus on here. So I've touched a couple of files. If I ls, I'll see that I list those files in the directory and I've got them there. And my git status is going to tell me that I've got an index.html and index.css. In fact, I'm actually going to create myself a little alias here. One of the nice things about Git is that you can create aliases which allow you to type long commands more quickly. Because this git status is really long and it's taking up a lot of space. What I really want to do is type git status -s for silent mode. Because then right here it's showing me, oh, I've got two files, and because they're red, it means that they're not in the staging area. And because they're question marks, it means that they're untracked. They're not modified files, they're completely new to Git. So I love this git status -s, but I'm going to type all that all the time. So I'm going to create a global alias. So I'm going to get to configure itself, git config --global. That means for all the repositories that I work on under this user account on this computer, git config --global, I'm going to create an alias, and I'm going to call that S. And when I type the alias S, or when I type git S, what I really want to be typed is git status, status -s. So I just put the status -s there, and now I can just type git S, it will give me that status. So that's just a nice little kind of cleanup. Great. So now let's do what I would do. Let's just kind of create some commits. So let's just add the first file and look at git status, and I'll see now that it's green, so it's in the staging area. Now this is kind of designed to be an intermediate class, but just to make absolutely sure that everyone's up to speed, what we're talking about here is that in Git, you don't just commit files. Firstly, you add them to a staging area, and you can kind of think of it like a shopping basket. It's a place where you kind of, if you're going to Amazon.com and figuring out what to buy, you can put a couple of things in, or remove one or two, change the quantities, and then at some point in time you'd be like, yes, that's what I want to buy, and you'd hit the purchase button. But it's kind of like that with the staging area in Git. You add a few files, get it just ready, and then once you've got that set up, you git commit to make a long-term store of those changes that you've made.
That's great, Peter. Let me I'm kind of curious how much experience people have with Git who are on the webinar. So if you can just fill out the poll and say, if you're new to it, or you have some experience, or you're intermediate, or you're an expert at Git, that'll just help us make sure that what we're talking about here makes sense to folks. So I'm just going to close the poll in 3, 2, 1 and display the results. So looks like we've got a fairly even match between newbies, some experience, and intermediate, and a few experts on the call as well. So great.
Great. Well, hopefully there'll be something for the experts. You may be going a little fast for the newbies, but I'm going to try to give at least a smattering of introductory information, so what I'm covering is not completely over your head. So as I said, with three-stage thinking, what we're doing is we're adding stuff so it's ready to be committed. And stuff that you add to this staging area or this index, that's not saved. But once you are ready and then you commit that to kind of save it for good, then it goes into history. And that's what I'm going to do now. So I'm going to take this index.html and I'm going to git commit it. And I'm going to put a message right here. So git commit -m with the message of added homepage. And then I've got, if I look at my status, I've got this one file that Git is still telling me is untracked, or I can write it in full git status, and it's much more explicit. It's in where on branch master, we won't be fussing around too much with branches today. We've got this untracked file, which means it's a file that Git knows you've created, but you've not told it. You've not told it that you want to put it into the next commit. You've not told it to save it. You've not saved it into history, and so it's going to want that. So what we want to do is add that to our staging area. So we're going to git add, we could, as we did before, git add index.css, but I'm just going to git add dot, which is add all of the files that are untracked or modified, except deletions. So git add dot, look at my git status, that's better. I've got this added file in my staging area. I can do it in full, and I will see, that's right. I've got these changes to be committed, ready to go, and it's index.css. So if I was to git commit with a message styled the home page, now what we're going to see is when I check my git status, it's all clean. There's nothing to commit. The working directory is clean. But when I do, I'm going to do a special log file, because what I really want to do is git log -- one line. The log will show me the history of my commits, and -- one line will just show me one line of each, so it doesn't take up too much space. Let me just show what I mean. If I just do git log, it's great. I mean, it tells me the author and the date, and this big long thing here is a SHA-1 hash, so it uniquely identifies the commit. So if I was talking about this styling the homepage commit, typically it's, oh yeah, I'm working on 4A 6E. On a really large project, I might have to describe up to 6 or 7 of the characters for it to be unique. but for most projects, the first 4, maybe 5 characters we need to identify. So if I tell you about, hey, what do you think of the BD41 commit, it means that I'm talking about this first commit where I added the home page. Why is it these big SHA-1 hashes? Well, there's lots of really interesting magical benefits you get. For example, this hash, fully unique. If you have another repository with exactly the same hash for a commit, I can guarantee that it has all of, not only the same commit message and the same committer, but all of the same files all the way down, which is just a function of the way that these SHA-1 hashes are built. But the main reason that we use the SHA-1 hashes is because in something like Subversion, you have commit 1 and commit 2 and commit 3. It's a distributed version control system, so it can't work that way because I might be making 20 commits on my computer whilst you're going and making 15 on yours, so it wouldn't know who made commit number 3. So it uses these SHA-1 hashes as globally unique identifiers, so we don't have to figure out, oh, you know, who made the next commit. But this kind of log view is a little long. It's taking up a lot of space. I think you can imagine if we had 20, 30, 40 commits, this would look a little ugly. So what I might really want to do is do a git log --1 line and just see a tighter view. So I can see, oh yeah, there was BD41 where I added the home page and 4A60 where I styled it. One very short comment I'm going to make about commit messages and commits. Generally, I would add more information to my commit messages, and I probably wouldn't commit adding the home page and styling it. Those don't feel like 2 different commits. And it's worth really taking the time in a real project to think about what is the story you're telling. Can somebody see looking through your commit messages what you're working on? And are these commits atomic, and do they have a single responsibility? Does each commit focused on a specific thing you did, like fixed the test for the checkout page, or updated the copyright on the home page, or whatever it is? So you really want to think a little bit about that stuff, because increasingly when I go into to manage or to work with a team, I will look at their Git commit history to figure out what they're doing and to kind of tell the story of what's being done. But in this session, we're only here for an hour, we're throwing the repository away at the end, so I'm going to be a bit cavalier with my messages and with the size and shape of my commits, because I really just want to focus on the working of Git. Great, so what do we want to do next? Well, let's go create some more files. One of the first things that people often mess up with in Git is that they make a typo. So let's touch about.html. Imagine we're adding an about us page. And, excuse me. Okay, so let's imagine that we're adding an about us page. And I want to commit that. So I'm going to, firstly I'm going to add it to that staging area so it's ready to be committed, and I can see with my Git status now, or I can do Git status in full if you've not seen this before. Changes to be committed, I've added it so it's ready there. So the next time I commit, that about page is going to go in. And then I can git commit with a message of added about us page. Oh, and you know, cat runs over the keyboard at this point in time, but I still hit commit, I still hit return. Well, this is not looking good at all. I'm just going to use an alias I've created for myself, this git lg that's kind of a one line with a bit of extra stuff. Look at this. The first 2 commits looked fine, but I'm getting this added about us page, no good at all. So I really want to fix that. And so what I'm going to do is a git commit --amend. Git commit amend is awesome. What it allows you to do is change the last commit you made. So let's give it a try. And in this particular case, I'm not giving it a message by putting -m. So it's going to throw me into my default text editor, which is on most machines, Windows, Mac, and Linux alike. It's usually VI. And now, if I'm in VI, I can use the incredibly obvious key bindings of hitting I to go into insert mode, and then coming along to the end of this line. And now I can just go edit this message. So added about us page. That was what I really wanted to say. I'm going to escape out of VI, and I'm going to hit :WQ to write the file and then quit out of VI. And there we go. It's remade that commit. So now when I look at my Git log, it says added about us page. If you're really paying attention, the SHA-1 hash has changed. So we are kind of rewriting history. We're changing things, which we'll talk about in a moment. But it certainly solved a problem because it's like, hey, we added the About Us page. Awesome.
Incredible,
Now,
Peter, that you can
let's
change history using Git. So I just wanted to check what languages people use because that may affect what you use in your example. So what is the primary programming language you use, whether it's Cold Fusion, PHP, ASP.NET, Java, or something else? And I'll just go ahead and close the poll in a few secs, and then we'll see what everyone is using as their primary language here on this particular webinar. And not surprisingly, most people are using Cold Fusion, but we've got a few folks who are using different languages. So does it matter what language you're programming in to use Git, Peter?
Nope, the great thing about this is none of this is language dependent. I mean, in this case, I'm just creating nominally HTML and CSS files, but it really doesn't matter if you're using Java, Ruby, Python, Go, Scala, Clojure, Cold Fusion, PHP, whatever you're working with, the principles of version control are exactly the same.
And could you even use it on non-programming files like config files or other text files? Or
much more than that, if you're collaborating with people, if you're keeping track of changes to text-based files, you should consider using Git. And if you happen to be collaborating with other people on them, I personally think you should also use GitHub. I'll give an example. I'm currently writing 2 books, one for Pearson called Git Distilled, and one for O'Reilly called Getting Started with GitHub. And in both cases, I created a Git repository to keep track of the copy that I'm writing, not any source code, the actual text for the book. And I'm finding a very easy way to keep track of my changes, to get feedback from collaborators, and then eventually to kind of get it over to the publishers.
wow, that's amazing. So back to the Git tutorial.
Great. So whenever you come back from anything, whether it's a coffee break or just going into another directory or whatever it is, always check your status just to make sure, do I have some files that I've got to commit? Well, it's like, nope, I'm clean. I'm on the sponge master, I've got nothing to commit, and the working directory is clean. Cool. So let's do something else. Let's imagine that we're going to create a checkout page. So let's just touch a page called checkout.html. And then let's imagine that we're also going to go edit the home page to create a link to it. So I'm going to use SUBL, just means I'm going to use Sublime, which is a text editor. I could use VI or Emacs, or I could open this up in Notepad if I wanted. But I'm going to use Sublime, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit the index.html. And when I do that, this is going to, excuse me, it's just need to Sublime, sometimes remember the last thing. There we go. And I'm going to say link to checkout page. I'm not worried about putting my href in here, which I usually would do. Let's keep the focus on Git, not the details of markup. So if I look at my status, I have 2 things. I've got the untracked file like I did before, and this is this checkout.html. So I've added a new file and it's not tracked. I also have a modified file. And if I type git diff, it'll even show me what I've changed in that file. So it'll show me, oh yeah, look, on that file, I added the words link to checkout page. Now, what I did a number of times in my early days is there happens to be a shortcut for both adding and committing a file in one go, and it's git commit -am, or -a to add and commit, and the M is there, of course, as we were saying before, for the message. So my message is going to be added checkout page to the website, and I'm hoping that a few people with some Git experience are groaning because you know what mistake I'm just about to make. Well, that appeared to work. I added the checkout page to the website, so I should probably just go on to the next thing. Let me check my Git status, though. Well, that's not good. So it turns out that when you use this command, git commit -a, what it actually does is it will only add and then commit modified files. So it's great if you like added something to a file that you already have in version control, but if you've got an unchecked file, it's not going to do anything with that at all. So usually this would be the point where I will type git add dot to kind of stage the file that's missing. Here we go, now I've staged it, so now it's ready to be committed. And then in the past, don't do this, I would have typed git commit, really added checkout page. Right? This would be the place where I kind of admitted the fact that I didn't add what I thought I'd added. That would not be good, right? I'm going to look pretty stupid doing this. So what I'm actually going to do instead is I'm going to do a git commit -- amend. And because this checkout.html is now staged, I had to do that. I had to do the git add dot first. What it's going to do is it's going to amend my last checkout so that instead of just having the notification to index.html, it also has the new file. Now, while I'm here, I could edit my content. So if I wanted to go into insert mode, I could go in here and say something about this message. But I'm quite happy with it the way it is. So I'm just going to hit :WQ to write and quit to get out of VI. And now, when I look at my Git status, I'm all clean. And when I look at my log, awesome. Added checkout page to the website. And if I can actually show that, I can git show head, which is the last commit, and it will show the two things, that I added this checkout.html file, and on the index.html file, I added this line. So that's really nice. So git commit amend can get you out of a lot of trouble. And in fact, looking at my git log, I noticed that I said added whatever page every other time, but on the last one I said to the website. That feels a little lame to me. I feel like there's not a consistency with what I'm saying. So let me just git commit -- amend one more time, and let's remove that to the website because it didn't say it in any of the other commit messages. Why would it say it in this one? Escape, write, and quit. And now my git status is still clean. I haven't changed that. But when I look at my git log now, there we go. Now I think my commit messages are a bit short, but at least they're consistent. And I can live with short in a demo. So git commit amend can get you out of trouble. The problem is people then say, well, that's great, but I kind of messed up. Like, say they styled the home page. Say that was messed up. What would I do around that? Well, unfortunately, git commit amend only works on the very last commit. If you want to undo something a little further back, you're going to have to use the git reset command. So let's take a little time and look at that. We'll leave the history we have now, and let's get some more files. So let's type, say, contact.html, contact.css, a history, like a history of the company.html, and a history.css. This is just space limited, so that when I do that, it creates those 4 new files. And my git status is that I've got 4 untracked files, and that's exactly what I'd expect. Now imagine that I'm a junior developer, and I've been told that you should make these atomic commits, so you should kind of put similar things together. So usually, the way you would really put these together is you would put the contact.html and CSS together and say added a contact page, and the history.html and CSS together and say added a history page, because the story that the business team cares about is that you're adding these new pages or new features or new units of work. Let's imagine I'm kind of a junior developer and I didn't get that. I'm like, hey, similar things together. So I'm going to create one commit saying added markup for pages and another commit called adding CSS for pages. Not a great idea, but I've certainly seen people do stuff like this before. So let's do that. Git add, say star.html, because one of the ways you can add things to the staging area is with the kind of file glob pattern. So that's going to add all the HTML files so that they are in the staging area. And I can see that, yes, contact and history.html are now ready to be committed. Cool. So let's git commit that. I'm going to commit it with a message of added markup for new pages, which I think is a double win, because firstly I'm just saying like added markup, like anybody really cares, and secondly for new pages without even telling you what they are. Okay, what else? Well, let's add the remaining files and check the status. Oh yeah, the contact one. So I'm going to now say git commit -n added styling for new pages. And now I've managed to effectively use git status is clear, but when I look at the log, I've effectively used it to completely hide anything useful about what I was doing. Not new pages. I mean, if I'm running a business team and I'm looking at this, it gives me no good sense of what's going on. So how can we fix this? Well, what I really want to do is I want to throw away the last 2 commits. And what I want to do is I want to throw them away, but still keep the changes. I still want those files. I just don't want those commits, this C7B9 and this 8751, I want those to disappear. So let's do that. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm just going to git reset. I'm going to use the -- mixed mode, which is the default. So I have to type it at all. There are 3 levels, soft, mixed, and hard, and we'll look at how and when we choose each. So I'm going to git reset head tilde 2, which means I want to go to the head, the very last commit I made on this branch, and I want to go back to before that. So I'm going to throw away my last 2 commits. And if I git reset head tilde 2, the files are still there. If I do a git status, it will show me it's kept me my 4 files, but now they're untracked again. But if I look at the git log, my 2 commits are gone. So this is great. It's like I can throw away those kind of stupid commits I made and recommit more intelligently.
So that's great, Peter. Got a couple of questions from folks. One question is, there's this yellow X that sometimes turns up on your lines but sometimes doesn't, and is there any significance to that? There's one there right there now.
Telling me that I've got a dirty staging directory, that I've got a dirty working directory. It is, I have some things configured. I am using Z shell instead of bash, and it does a really good job of, it's also telling me things like I'm in a Git, I'm in a directory that is being versioned by Git, and that I'm currently on the master branch. So it's giving me a lot of really nice information right there on the command line. If you use my Z shell, ZSH, you can get all this stuff for free as well. In bash, you have to kind of do other things to get it.
Great. And then the other question we had, got some folks who are using some different source control, got someone who's using Subversion and wondering, is it going to be a nightmare to convert to Git? And I don't know if you want to cover that now or cover that in the Q&A, but I just wanted to alert you that some folks use different things.
It's actually pretty straightforward. The main thing you need to do with Git is you need to learn the basics. I mean, I teach full-day foundation classes, but you can go to try.github.com and learn the basics online. There are some code school, Greg Pollock's thing, the guy who did the videos for zombies, has some pretty good online courses. There's lots of good materials out there. You really need to give yourself a solid day to learn Git. But if you do that, in terms of taking an existing Subversion repository and to port it across to Git and to keep all of the history and the tags and the branches and stuff, that's pretty straightforward. There are absolutely tools for doing that, and an awful lot of companies have gone through that process. So if you run into any problems at all, it's pretty easy to find the answers on Stack Overflow.
Great. And I'm kind of curious what version controls people's system, they are using, whether they're using Git or Subversion or Mercurial or CVS or something else. So, well, maybe all of the above, if they've got a really complicated mixture of projects that they have to use different things. So let's go ahead and close that poll in 3, 2, 1. And let's see what folks use. Well, not surprisingly, most people are either using Git or Subversion. In fact, more people are using Subversion on this call. And then a few folks using some other things, Mercurial, CVS, and some various other things. So does that accord with your experience that Git and Subversion are the top ones in use these days, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, what I've seen happening is, firstly, apologies right now for anyone who's still using CVS. Please just try to get another job because your life is too valuable to spend fighting with CVS every day. That was the source control system that effectively kind of became obsolete, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago once most people started moving to Subversion. Subversion's okay, unless you want to check out another branch from a really large repository, in which case, the good thing about Subversion is you can get real long coffee breaks when you're checking out another branch, because it can take a while on a large repo. Also, the merge conflicts were a little bit of a pain. So I have yet to come across anybody who has moved from Subversion to Git and then later moved back. It seems to be a one-way trend, which is fairly telling. In terms of adoption, I mean, in the startup community, pretty much everyone uses Git. If you don't, you probably won't get a job. In mid-sized companies and enterprises, there's a huge amount of adoption of Git, but there's still a lot of legacies. There's still a lot of ClearCase, Perforce, Subversion is still fairly popular, but everyone I hear of is leaving Subversion to move to Git, but that's why they contact me. I'm sure there are plenty of people who are still using Subversion, but if you're using it, at least check out, like throw a repo up on GitHub and just play with Git locally at home just for some files, get some familiarity, and I think once you do, you're probably going to want to move your company to Git at some point in the foreseeable future. Alternatives to Git, I mean, there's Mercurial and Bazaar, B-A-Z-A-A-R, are both distributed version control systems. Mercurial got some traction, especially in the Python community. But the problem with both of them is it's like Git has kind of won. For whatever reason, I think there were arguments to say Mercurial and Bazaar both have strengths that Git doesn't have and vice versa, but it kind of doesn't matter. The world has moved to Git, and I think it makes a lot of sense to use it.
So for any of those version control systems, it's pretty straightforward to move to Git?
Yep, each one has its own thing. Subversion is the thing that most people have done because almost everyone uses Subversion, and now very many of those use Git. There are some issues you can run into, like with Perforce, for example. There are scripts to take. There's a script you can download to take a Perforce repo. I'm doing this for a client now, and there are some cases where it's hard to get accurate branch information because of the way that you can do partial views and you can commit changes to individual files rather than to the repository. You sometimes can create situations in Perforce that it's hard to describe accurately in Git. But there's still ways. You just clean up the branches at the end. You add a few kind of merges. It's a manageable process.
Great. Well, thanks for talking about that. I'm sure it's helped out folks who are looking at moving.
Great. So back into the problem we had here was we created these two commits, and we saw this junior developer had made these two commits that were kind of stupid, so we threw them away by doing this git reset in 2.2. And git reset in the mixed mode, the default mode, throws away your commits, and it throws those files out of the staging area, so it just puts them in your working directory. It does leave them there. Well, now let's commit these the way that they should be. Now, clearly we should have a commit for the history page and a commit for the contact page. So again, I'm going to use a log pattern. I'm going to git add, and I'm going to add, say, con star, which is anything starting with the letters con or co even. So what that's doing there is, if I look at the git status, I will see that that's now added the two contact us, the contact.html and contact.css, the staging area. Perfect. So now I can commit that with a message of added contact page. That feels like the right kind of progress. I look at the log. Yeah, that's kind of consistent with everything else I was doing. I'm telling kind of this clear ongoing narrative about the new pages I'm adding. But I'm not done. My git status shows me I've got to add the history page. So I can just git add all of the remaining files, git add dot, and then git commit those. The message of added history page. Check my git status to make sure I really commit things, which I did. It worked. It's nothing to commit. Working directory is clean. That's good news. And when I look at my git log, now I have this nice clean history. But unfortunately, now my boss intervenes. He comes and says, well, I feel like we got too many commits in history, so I want you to go take those last two commits and make them one. And that's a pretty stupid thing to ask, but that's what bosses are for. They have to do something to keep themselves busy, so great. So now I've got to take those two commits and turn them into one. So I've got to take 17BB and 2D11 and just squash those into a single commit. There's something called git rebase-i, rebase interactive, that I could use, but right now I'm going to use the git reset again, but in a slightly different way. Remember last time I did a git reset, and it was -- mixed, but that's the default mode, so I just removed that and just typed git reset. But this time I'm going to use one of the other modes, which is soft. And again, we want to do head 2.2, we want to throw away the last two commits, but with soft, it's going to throw away the commits. That's what git reset does. But it's going to leave all the files that I take out of history in my staging area. It's actually going to save me a step, and we'll see why, because now if I look at my git status, I've got those 4 files, and I can look at my git log, and I'll see, oh yeah, those two commits are gone again. But now we're in staging area, so instead of having to type git add dot, I can just go straight into git commit -m added contact and history pages. So with the -- soft, it's just all the stuff that was in your history. Now it goes into the staging area instead of the working directory. So it's already ready to be recommitted, just like I might want to do here. Now, first you're like, is it really worth it to have a different mode, like say if you type in git add dot? Nah, maybe not. But the one thing is, imagine if I had like another 40 files in my working directory I haven't committed properly. It just allowed me to just put these straight in the staging area, recommit them, and then move on. So it's actually pretty useful. So anyway, so now I look at my status and it's all clean. I look at the log. Perfect. I've got this nice, I think it's a little bit of a lame history that's added contact and history pages. In fact, a good rule of thumb I use is I use the word and as a warning message in commit messages. If I say, did this and that in a commit message, the first question I ask myself is, should I really have done those together, or is this a sign that there should be two separate commits? Should I really add a contact page and added a history page? And in this case, I think I probably should have, but hey, I'm doing what my boss wanted. Now, there's many times where you'll have the and word, added, maybe updated the copyright page in the home and updated the copyright notice on the home and contact pages. Okay, that might actually be a single commit. So don't feel like you should never have an and in your commit messages, but just look at it as like a warning sign, like should these be two separate commits? So anyway, my boss comes back a little later in the day and he says, not only do we have too many commits, we've got too many pages on our website. Let's say we're an e-commerce store, and we don't want people contacting us or reading our history. We just want people to buy stuff from us. So I want you to get rid of that last commit. I want you to throw away the contact and history pages. I never want them back. I'm never going to need them. They're a stupid idea. I don't know why you wasted the day on building them. Okay then, you're absolutely sure? Yeah. No way I'm ever going to want those files again. But in this case, there's a way I can fix this. I can use another git reset, but I'm going to use the third mode. Just as it was the mixed one, the default one that just kind of throws stuff, it clears away the commits, it clears out the staging area, and just puts from the working directory just on your hard drive. Then there was the soft one that just threw away the commits, but left everything in the staging area so you could just commit it real easily. And then there's hard. And you really want to think twice about using this command because when you do, it's going to be head ~1 this time because remember we merged the two commits into one, so I only have one commit to throw away all this stuff. And when I do this, we're really throwing stuff away. And what I mean by that is it's going to get rid of the commit and it's going to clear the staging area. And it's going to delete the files. It's going to get rid of whatever changes I made. So when I do a git reset -- hard, like I'm serious about this, now when I look at the git log, my commit's gone. But when I look at my git status, there aren't any, the working directory is clean. And even if I look, those 4 files are now gone. So git reset, soft, mixed, which is the default, and hard. Very powerful ways for throwing away your last few commits and then maybe recommitting things in a different way with different information. But of course, there's not necessarily a great end to this story, which is the same boss comes in the next morning. He's like, I was thinking about it, and we may be an e-commerce business, but really we're a business based on trust. And the way that people trust us is by knowing that they can get in touch with us and that they know the history of the people who built this company. So, those files, and I'm like, you mean the files that you told me that you would never, ever, ever want back? He's like, yeah, those files. I think it's important to get those up as quick as possible because you have them up by, what is it? It's like 140 now. Could you have them up by 230? Because we really need that. And I'm like, well, kind of like I'm looking at my Git log, like, where would I get those files? They're gone. And now I'm going to talk to you about the one way that sometimes you can get removed history back. And it's called the Git reflog. The Git reflog is kind of cool. Firstly, let me set some expectations as to the limitations of it. Let's have a look at what it does. Git reflog. So if you type git reflog and hit return, it's a track of every single thing you've done to history on this computer over the last 30 days or so in this repository. So if you do garbage collection, which is something you can do by that you can explicitly do, that you might lose your reflog. If you're on another computer, you'll lose the reflog information. If I pushed this up to GitHub, somebody else cloned a copy and they wanted to get those 4 files back, they couldn't. The only person that has access to those 4 files is me on this computer right here. And if I waited more than a month to get the 4 files back, I wouldn't be able to. But I'm within all those criteria. It's a way that sometimes you can get back stuff that you really threw away. And where I want to get to is I want to get to the world here. You see where I'd like commit added contact page, the 2D11. And then after that, there was the commit added history page. I want to get those 2 commits back. So what I want to do is I want to go, for me, it's this head at -3. For me, it's a 17 BB. Any of you following along would be different. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to git reset hard to that commit point in time. What did that do? Well, let's have a look at the status. Hasn't changed that. It's still, still everything is committed and fine. But let's look at the log. Wow. So I managed to bring those 2 commits back that had been lost. And in fact, if I was to go look at them on the working directory, yeah, I've actually got those files back. So reflog is sometimes a way of getting back commits that you've otherwise made inaccessible. The one other thing I want to talk about, though, is so far we've been talking about changes that you should only make to private history. What do I mean by that? Well, private history are commits that you haven't yet pushed someplace else. So let me give an example. I'm actually going to go just real quick. I'm going to go into GitHub. I'm going to create a new repository. I'm going to call it website. If I don't have one of those yet, perfect. And I'm going to public. So I'm creating this repository, and I'm going to just do a couple of things so that I can push my work remotely. I'm going to set up a remote. So when I say git remote add origin, I'm saying whenever I say origin in the future, I really mean this big long thing, which happens to be github.com/peterbell, my username, / the repository name, website.git. Great. And now I can git push -u origin master. I could have just cut and pasted this from the website if I wanted. And what this is going to do is this is going to push a copy of all the changes I've made on my computer up to GitHub on the master branch, and -u makes it my default upstream, which means now in future I can just type git push or git pull, and it's just going to work without me having to type origin master. And I look here, and I'll see my copy of the site.
That's great. Got someone asking whether all these commands apply to a remote repository as well as a local one, or?
So here's the deal. Firstly, almost no Git commands apply to local repositories. You make all of your, you run all of your commands locally, and then once you've done that, you might fetch or pull the changes from the remote repository. You might push the changes you've made to the remote repository, but you wouldn't actually run any of these kinds, you don't commit or add or do any of these things to a remote repository. You do them locally and then push them. However, a really important point is that once you've pushed these changes, if there's any chance that anyone else is looking at them, you should not change history. If I was to do a git commit --amend now, it's possible for me to do this and take that added history page to say added history page again. I can do that. Now, if I try to push, it's going to complain a little. It's going to be, hey, you've got like a different history. So I'd actually have to git push -f. So I can actually force these changes up there and make it work. And what it's going to do is it's literally going to change the history. That added history page is gone, and now it's added history page again. I got away with that because it looks to me like nobody has forked or cloned my repo, so nobody else has a copy of this, so I got away with it. When you're working on a team, though, you do not want to use amend, reset, or the reflog on anything that you are. I guess you could use the reflog to take out a bunch, but you don't want to use git commit amend or git reset of any flavor for work that you have shared with others. And because of that, that really influences the workflow, because the workflow that I use is when I'm working with Git, typically I'll commit if I'm coding, I'll commit every 5-10 minutes, maybe even more often. Sometimes it's every 2 minutes. But I won't push. What I'll do is I'll pull from and push to a remote repository maybe 3-4 times a day. And before I do that, I look through my history and I say, do I have any typos in my commit? I look at Git log and I'll be like, are there any typos here? Are there any mistakes I've made? Do I have any commits that I feel stupid about? And if so, I will fix it all up locally on my machine before I share those changes with the rest of the team. And once I've done a Git push, then I really don't want to make those changes because I'm going to have a different history than other people and it's going to mess them up the next time they pull from the startup.
Great, that's a great tip. We have 15 minutes left, so if people have questions, if you want to put them in the question box, I know we have several already queued up. And then I don't know if you wanted to just go demo one more thing, Peter, before we go into the Q&A, or how do you want
exactly it. The one other thing I wanted to show just really quickly was, well, let's say that I'm working with a team. I've pushed this stuff up to Origin Master, which means I've pushed it up to, in this case, GitHub, my remote. But it turns out I really don't want to have this history page. I've got to get rid of it. That's okay. There's another command that is safe to use, and it's called git revert. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a copy of whatever this commit is, this 8016 for me, and I'm just going to git revert that. Oh, excuse me. I guess I should type git install. So git revert that. Okay. Now it gives me, I didn't give it a -m, it's giving me this default message, and it says it's reverting whatever that old message was, and it shows me what commit it reverted. This is a great message, so I'm just going to leave this as is and write and quit it. So now, if I look at my hard drive, the history, excuse me, if I look at my hard drive, the history page is gone, which was what I wanted to. I wanted to get rid of it. But when I look in my history, it's still there. I haven't got rid of the old commit. I've just added a new commit that does the complete opposite. If the old commit added files, it deletes them. If the old commit modified files, it unmodifies them. If the old commit deleted files, it put them back in. So it does the exact opposite, but it stays in history. So it's a little ugly, but this is safe to share with my team. So now, you notice on my Git log, I haven't pushed everything up to Origin Master. It's one commit behind. It's still at 8016. And in fact, if I type Git status, it will tell me that. It will say, hey, I'm ahead of Origin Master by one commit. And usually I'd leave it that way. But at some point in time during the day, I'd be like, okay, I've made 10, 15 commits. Let's push them. And I would push my changes up to the server. And now, not only the fact that I've added the history page, but now there's this commit showing that I reverted that and ended up deleting those two files. And I go to look at the website on GitHub, and you can see that the history page is gone. So briefly, that is an introduction to kind of undoing anything with Git. Now let's go over for some questions.
Great. And while you're typing your questions in, I'm just going to launch another poll just to see what features people are using, whether people already are on GitHub with a username, whether they use feature branches for development, using pull requests, and also whether you're using automated testing, which I know we haven't touched on, but that's one of the things you can do with this kind of repository. And I'll go ahead and close the poll in 3, 2, 1. Close, and let's just see that 3/4 of people already are on GitHub, and slightly less number of people are using feature branches and pull requests or doing automated testing. So I don't know if you have any comments on those results, Peter.
I mean, that's similar to what I see, which is most people have GitHub username, even if they are not using it for development and at work, whether they use it for open source projects, whether they just use it for their personal work, or just as a resume. I mean, these days, one of the first things, I spend most of my time working with developers and maybe kind of team leads, but I also spend time working with entrepreneurs and business people. And I'll talk to them about Git and GitHub from the perspective of one of the things I say now is, if somebody doesn't have a GitHub username, pretty much don't hire them. And I'm seeing that become, particularly in the startup community, it's not the same with, for an insurance firm in Cleveland, Ohio, but especially in the hubs and in the startup community, it's really unusual for somebody to get hired if they don't have a GitHub username and some kind of work up there to show the kinds of things they do outside of office hours.
And is there a cost to get a username, or?
The best thing is you can get a username for free. If you want private repositories, if you want to put stuff up on GitHub, like people are paying you to work on, so it needs to be hidden, you have to pay money. I think I pay $7 a month for 5 private repos. But if you just want to get a username and to put up some repositories, as many as you want, as long as you're allowed to let other people look at them, that's completely free.
Great. And any thoughts on whether using any of these feature branches or pull requests or automating testing is something people should be looking at? Or
yeah, absolutely. So I mean, the best practices these days is typically what you do is if anyone's using Git flow, please don't. Feel free to ask me why afterwards. But basically, all you need is a master branch, which is the place that you are most of the time. And then you need, every time you want to add some new functionality, you go create a feature branch for it. Program on it, make your commits there. You might push your feature branch up to GitHub so other people can look at it and this kind of drop down list of branches and see. So let's say, for example, I wanted to create a shopping cart. What I would do is I would the card mess I'm going to do is I'm going to git push, I'm going to set an upstream and push it to the origin cart. And what I'm now going to do is push this separate line of work, this separate feature branch up to GitHub. So now if somebody else wants to see what's about, they can go and see the shopping cart. In fact, what I could even do is I could compare and pull request here. So what it's saying is this added a first cut of shopping cart. Oops. Fix the typo here. I'm not going to fix the commit message. Now I've shared it. I'm going to send a pull request. And then this is a place where somebody comes to this website and looks down the right-hand side at the here for the pull requests. They're going to see, oh look, somebody's working on this shopping cart branch and adding a first cut of the shopping cart. And we can see what they've been programming and what changes they've made. And we can say things like, well, looks good to me. Let's do a +1. I agree that we should let's ship it. So you might get, you'd have some back and forth, people running tests, making sure it's good, and then when they're happy and they want to ship it, I can just merge that work in, confirm that it's merged, delete the branch, and now on the website, that shopping cart is part of this. And I can now just get checkout master here to get onto the main branch, and I can get, I can actually just get, let me do git pull -- rebase. I don't have local changes, so it should be fine either way. And this is going to go, I'm going to pull down all the changes and update. And now when I look at my Git log, that's great. So now I can see in history, I did a bunch of commits on master, but then I went up to the shopping cart. That's got now merged into the master branch. And that's really the kind of flow you want to use. It's also great because you can then do all your integration testing on these feature branches here. So typically you'd set it up so you could run your CI server like Jenkins or similar. You could run it against your shopping cart branch, for example, to make sure that that wasn't going to break the website before you merged it into master, which should always be committed.
Great. So I've got some questions here from some attendees. First one is, in Git, isn't the local repository essentially a mirror of the remote repository, or am I misunderstanding how this works?
While it's true that in Git you get a complete copy of the remote repository, anything that you commit to a local branch here, like on master, that is not pushed to the remote repository automatically. And that's great because it means I can work on an airplane or on a bus or in the middle of the mountains with no internet access. I can make a bunch of commits and I can undo history and create branches. All of those are local operations. Then when I push those changes to the remote server, then it needs to sync it all up and take all this stuff on my master branch and push them to the shared master branch. So it is true that I have a copy of everything, but it's not true that at any point in time we're perfectly synchronized. That's what happens when you fetch or pull from a remote repository to get what other people have been working on and push to share what you've been developing.
So that's one of the great strengths of Git, that you can be disconnected and then later you can sync and easily merge in other people's changes or your own changes.
Absolutely, and it's a super quick operation when you're doing things like checking out branches or previous versions in history, because you have all of the history and all of the branches locally. And yet, because of the way Git stores this information in the file system, often an entire Git repository with the whole history of a long project will only be, double the size of, maybe 3 times the size of just the currently checked out working directory. So it really doesn't take up that much disk space or that much time to clone.
Okay, so the next question we've got is, if you want to get that file you deleted, I think it was history.html, back, what's the easiest way?
Well, so there's a few things I could do. Let me have a look at my Git log. One thing I could do, so I'm trying to get this history page, right? So one thing I could do is I could cherry pick this. And the other thing I could do is revert this revert. I could git revert, and that would do the opposite of doing the opposite of creating this. So let me use a cherry pick. So git cherry pick, and this allows me just to take any given commit from earlier in history. It's like I did not paste that correctly. So I'm looking for this. I want to get a copy of that. And then I want to git cherry pick that change, and it will recreate it. So now if I look at the directory, I've got my history.html, history.css, and if I look at my git log, it has remade that same added history page again commit.
Great. And then got someone asking, when should they rebase and how to do that?
So generally, I will rebase. Let's say that somebody has made a change remotely. So I'm actually going to go to this web page. I'm going to go to the home page, and I'm just going to edit it right here in GitHub. I'm going to say to checkout page, and I'm going to say home page logo here. So I've added a logo to the website, and I'm going to make it really clear that I did that. I'm going to scroll down this page, and I'm going to say added logo to website. Great, commit changes. Now, let's say that while that was going on here, I did something else too. Let me say you as an editor on the index.css and new styling here. So now if I do my git status here, I will see that I've modified the CSS file, and remotely I've made this extra commit that I currently don't have. So I could see what was up just by doing a git fetch, but what I'm actually going to do here is I want to now, firstly, let me commit my change. Let me commit -an, it's a modified file, so I can add and commit in one go, added new styling. Now that I've done that, what I now want to do is I don't want it to look like I was working while somebody else was. So the way of rebasing, it's something you do just before merging, and it's something you do to make it look like one developer was working at a time. It's going to be a little bit of a rush for us to go through it now, but just to show us that I can do just a git pull -- rebase here. And what it's going to do is it's going to undo the work that I've done. It's then going to pull down all the stuff from the server and replay my work on top of it. So it now looks, if I look at log, like I added the new styling after I added the logo to the website, and then I added the new styling. That looked like the flow, and in fact, the added history page too. So it's basically a way to make it look like there's this clean history, and then when I git push, just to update that, this is, say, my latest changes up there, you will now see, great, so everything is now up to date, but it looks like there was one person at a time. So rebasing is a really nice thing to do with your local work and with feature branches that you haven't shared, or possibly just before you merge a feature branch in.
So a related question here is, when is a rebase a better choice than a merge?
A rebase never replaces a merge. A rebase is preparation for a merge. You're always going to merge stuff. It may be a fast-forward merge, in which case you won't get a merge commit, but you're always going to merge stuff from 2 different branches. The question is whether you want to rebase first, clean up your history. And generally, if you've got a team that's comfortable with it, or you as a developer are comfortable with it, rebasing is usually a good idea. So I would usually rebase before I merge something. And then for those who are comfortable with it, I might then do a no fast forward merge. So that way I still get my merge commit, but it looks like I was just working on one feature at a time.
Great. Got someone here who's not a command line fan, and they're wondering if you can recommend a GUI for Git.
So it depends. Once you're getting started with Git and learning Git, just don't do it. I was not a command line fan either. I was like hardcore Windows for the longest time. I didn't like this Mac rubbish. Learn to love the command line. Not because you absolutely need it to get by in Git, you don't. And there are tools like the GitHub desktop and SourceTree from Atlassian. Tower is a Mac only. There's a number of different GUI tools. Just don't use Tortoise Git. That is the one that I would kind of go out of my way to not recommend. But I'm going to strongly recommend that if you really want to learn how to use Git, learn it in the command line, and then if necessary over time, use the GUI to speed some things up. Although my experience is that there's some things that GUIs just can't do, so really learn Git on the command line. It will transform your experience of it, and it will make it much more enjoyable to work with.
And mentioning your command line, someone really likes the prompt that you're using here, and they're wondering what it is that looks so cool.
Just use OMyZ shell or ZSH instead of Bash, and you'll get all this stuff for free.
Great. And then what about undoing bigger mistakes, like if you make a merge but it was a screw-up? Is that an impossible thing to get out of? Or?
Nope. You can actually reset or revert a merge. So if you merge something and then you want to get those files out but still keep shared history, you'd revert it. But let's say I do a merge locally and I'm like, oh wow, now all my tests are failing, this is totally messed up. I can just git reset head -1. That will throw away the merge commit, and so I will still have my old branch and I will still have my old master branch. So it's very easy to throw away.
That's pretty amazing that you say it's so flexible to fix screw-ups in this sort of thing.
That's the really nice thing. Git gives you an amazing set of tools, and it really is worth learning some of them because it gives you a lot of power for no matter how much you mess things up, there's usually a quick way to fix them up.
Great. And Jan is mentioning you can use the command line and a GUI at the same time on a project. You don't have to like commit to doing one or the other.
Absolutely. I find that the more that I get comfortable with the command line, I find GUIs generally slow me down now, so I tend not to use them, but you're absolutely right. Some people start by using them for visualization or for patch commits, where, for example, you've got 3 changes in a file and you only want to commit or stage or commit 1 or 2 of them so that you break that out into different commits. You could do that command line git add -key to be in patch mode, but some people find it easier to just drag and drop it in a GUI. So yeah, GUI plus command line is also a way to go.
Well, we're pretty much out of time here. One final question that I think is useful for everyone is, so what's the next step if you want to take Git further and learn more about it?
Well, I mean, the very first thing to do is make sure you've got Git installed, git -- version, and if you haven't, you can go to mac.github.com or windows.github.com, are 2 places to download desktops, and then if you go into the options, you'll find the ability to install command line tools. So you definitely want to do that. Beyond that, I would say try Git, gives you the basics. I personally like the stuff on Code School. There's Git Real and Git Real 2 are 2 classes. It's like $30 a month, so you'd want to like sign up for a month, do the classes, and then stop unless you need the other stuff. But there's books. I'm writing 2 of them, but if you can't wait for those, there's a great one by a guy called Matthew Nicala from O'Reilly called and there's also the free book, Scotch Cons Pro Git, although that's getting a little outdated now. Definitely check out help.github.com. There's lots of resources there. Stack Overflow also helps. But just start using it on the project. And then as you run into issues, put another repository on the side and use that kind of scratch repository to try stuff on a project you don't care about.
Great. So I believe your Twitter handle is Peter Bell, one word. If folks want to shoot over any other things in your direction about Git, in particular why they shouldn't use Git Flow, which you said you didn't want to cover in this because it's a little too extensive.
Yep.
But I know you do a lot of tweeting, and that's a good way to reach you.
and also peter@email.com if you want to send me an email. So it's good either way.
Great. Well, thanks for an excellent presentation on this very important subject of source control. We did a recent survey that revealed, 10 to 20% of coders don't do any source control. So certainly doing something here with Git or Subversion would be a major improvement. We will be back next month at the same time, second Tuesday of the month, 1 p.m. Eastern. And thanks so much, Peter.
Michael, thank you so much for organizing, and thanks everyone for attending. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.